The old ball and chain. Let me check with the missus. Gotta check with the boss. Happy wife, happy life. Now, we've all heard these sayings, and the sayings go on and on. There's a million of them, and they are funny. But some guys see them as like the real thing. They're just kind of a sarcastic, kind of comical dig at marriage. But a lot of men today see it as, hey, this is the reality. Now, these are funny because there is some truth in it. But a lot of people go beyond that today. What they do is they avoid marriage. A lot of men are avoiding marriage altogether. They see it as a ball and chain. They see it as, oh no, I'm going to lose my life. It's too much of a commitment. Or some guys just want to live their own life. They're like, I don't want to think about other people. And I think a lot of men today are forgetting the benefits of marriage. Marriage makes men better. It just does. You can deny it, you can run from it, but the reality always shows up in the lives of men. Men who get married and stay married will often live much better lives than those who stay single. Why is that? Well, we're going to dig in that on today's show, so let's jump in.
Welcome to the Confident Man Podcast, empowering men with the confidence they need to live their adventure. Now, here is your host, David Maxwell.
Hey guys, welcome to the Confident Man Podcast. I'm so glad you joined me here today. Today I'm excited about the topic and what we're going to be talking about because it's part of our March Man Month series. We've really had a lot of downloads in the area of relationships. And so we're hitting some of these key topics this month because men want to know, how can I have better relationships? How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better man toward women? What can I do to get women to like me and all those things? And so I'm excited about that because I believe it's part of us being our very best as men. Now, I was 23 when I got married. My wife, Angie, she was 1 month away from 21, but she had graduated from college in 3 years. Of course, I have to say that because it makes me feel better about that, because now I look back and think we were such children. And we were both young. We thought we knew it all. We thought we were getting, we knew what we were getting into, but of course we didn't. And I look back now, and it's kind of funny because I look back how dumb I was at 23. And I really was. I was amazed that her family actually approved of me. They're like, yes, you can marry this guy. When what they should have said is, this guy's an idiot. Because I had a lot of growing up to do. We both did. And we didn't do everything perfect. We made tons of mistakes. But the fact is, we grew. We got better. And I think that's something a lot of people miss today, especially a lot of men. They think that they have to be at this perfect state of maturity and growth, then they'll get married. They think, well, once I get to this point in life, once I get to that point in life, I'll get married. And they keep putting it off. They keep thinking, well, it'll be later because I need to work on myself a lot more. Now, don't get me wrong. The more mature you are, the better. The more you grow and know yourself, the better. But the reality is we're all going to grow. Now, when we got married, Angie was a lot more mature than I was. She was real solid. She had a lot more maturity in her, and I didn't. And it caused a lot of trouble in the beginning. I did a lot of dumb things, and that's just the reality of it. But the key is that we did grow. You see, marriage was good for me because it gave me a purpose to my growth. And it kind of gave me a motivation to grow and get better. And I think that's an aspect of marriage that as men, a lot of times we miss. Marriage brings a ton of benefits to us as men. It's not a negative. It's not the end of our manhood. It's not the end of our, the wonderful days of singleness. No, we actually grow and do a lot better in marriage. Because the deal is, when we get married, it helps us to expand ourselves. We grow beyond ourselves as men. And I think we forget that a lot of our growth will come after we get married and not before. Marriage isn't the end of who we are as men. In fact, I think it's just the beginning of us as men reaching our potential. So today we're going to be looking at how marriage is good for men, because it'll help us in 3 key areas that I think a lot of guys don't think about. 1, it's going to encourage our intimacy. 2, it's going to focus our purpose. And 3, it's going to build a lasting legacy. right, the first thing we want to talk about is how marriage is good for men because marriage encourages intimacy. One of the biggest benefits of men getting married is that it pushes them to kind of go on that journey of intimacy, to get to know their wife in a really deep way. Getting married is the beginning of that journey, and it encourages men to move into their emotional side, their intimate side. And that has huge benefits for men. It really does. Because men, more often than not, are task-oriented. We just are. We want to get the job done. We want to take care of business. It's good. It's part of our nature. It's how we were created. So I don't think it's a bad thing. But I think sometimes we forget that that's only one part of it. Now, a lot of people in society today kind of castigate that side as toxic. Oh, the toxic men. But here's the truth. Men over the centuries, we're the one who fought wars. We're the one who pursued scientific discoveries. We're the ones who've explored new parts of the world, and we built empires. Every man should be encouraged to fulfill his role as a man, because it's part of who we are. We don't want to deny that. We don't want to run away from it. We don't want to say that's toxic. A lot of great things have happened in the past because of men. You say, well, a lot of bad things have happened in the past because of men. That's true. And a lot of times it's men who had misguided direction in their life. They were kind of going in the wrong way, or they were all about power and pursuit. But how many men could have stopped them but didn't? And that's why you as a man want to rise up and be all that you can be, because it fulfills that role. So there's nothing wrong with a man being a man. We should be a man. But we see this also in a way of relationally for men, because men are great at pursuing. We have for centuries, men have pursued the girl, sought to win the girl. They try to get the attention of a woman. They try to win her, and they'll do kind of whatever it takes. Why? Because we're competitive. Men love a competition. Men will compete over anything. I've seen men toss, wads of paper in a trash can and make it a competition. We love being competitive. And if it comes to winning a girl, men get really competitive. And you know what? That's good for men. Over the years, it's encouraged us to connect with maybe a different side of us, because that's how we connect to the woman. Yes, men have shown off and done everything, but also to connect with women, men have become more human. They focus on something besides getting the job done, doing the work. They focus on being a person. And I think we're missing that in men today. In the past, it was amazing because you saw men doing all kinds of things to win the girl. They would write poetry. They would do all of this stuff. I mean, look at Shakespeare's play, Romeo and Juliet. Romeo was doing all of this stuff to win Juliet, standing at the bottom and quoting poetry to her. And I'm not saying a lot of men did that in those days, but that was kind of the representation that men had to work to earn the girl and was willing to do something that wasn't really normal for him. Now, today, guys don't have to do that. Today, guys can just swipe and there's a girl. And they kind of get together and know that, hey, we're going to have sex. That's what this whole thing is about. And that's kind of sad. It's sad for guys, because winning the girl is a big celebration and accomplishment for men. And you don't want to take that away. And a lot of men today don't really find that passion in their life. And I think they're missing a big part of it. Now, the men who do, the men who win the girl and actually get married, that's great and it's good. But the problem for those guys sometimes comes afterwards, because they're so focused on winning the girl. Once they win her, they celebrate, they get married, they have the honeymoon. They're like, okay, I'm done. What's next? And they kind of move on. And as men, if we're not careful, we'll move on to the next challenge and think, well, I won the girl. That's done. So we move into the realm of, well, I have to provide. I have to be a success at work. I have to accomplish this, that, or the other. And we kind of move past, because that doesn't help the relationship with their wife. And this is the part of marriage that a lot of men don't see. Building that relationship with their wife is what really helps them become a better man. They go on that journey of intimacy, because building intimacy is very different from winning someone. When you win someone, yes, that's good, but building intimacy comes with time, spending time together, getting to know each other, becoming more familiar with each other, learning each other. Now, men aren't normally the best at that. We're just not. but it's a key to having a long-term successful marriage. Couples have to learn to be intimate. The ones who last do. They have to get closer to each other. And what that does for men, it's good for men because it pushes us to learn how to communicate, how to see things differently, how to see things from our wife's point of view. It works with women too. They have to learn to see things from a man's point of view, but we're dealing mainly with men here today. So for us as men, seeing things from the view of our wife, understanding our wife, learning about her. You see, those are the things that help us in our journey and our learning how to be intimate, us learning about emotions and things like that. And men have to learn how to get closer to their wife in an emotional way, in an intimate way, and not just a physical way. The physical part is easy. But when a man gets really intimate with his wife, when he builds that emotional relationship with her, it forces him to kind of work out emotionally. And men do have emotions. Men are very passionate. Men can put their passion to many things. And when they drive all of their passion into one woman, into one relationship, that does incredible things for her and for him as a man. Men have these powerful emotions, and when they really invest them, they get invested in the relationship. It makes for a stronger, deeper, longer lasting relationship. And that's why men today need to be encouraged to get married, encouraged to build that relationship. We want them to move past just the sexual side of a relationship. A lot of men are out there just having a bunch of sex, but they're not really building relationship. Nothing is challenging them on the emotional side or the mental side. Casual sex, the casual sex culture a lot of men are engaged in is really hurting them. They're getting lazy. They're not being challenged. They're not growing emotionally. They're not growing mentally. You know, they think of sex as just a physical act. So they've kind of moved the whole intimacy part out of relationships. And you know, that hasn't gone well. It hasn't gone well for men. It hasn't gone well for women. It's really not gone well for society. Because that attitude actually stunts our growth as men. And we don't want to be stunted in our growth. We want to grow to be all we can be as men. And that's the point. You have to grow emotionally if you're really going to develop all your gifts as a man. And that's why marriage is so good for men. It encourages them to go on that intimacy journey, which means they have to go on that journey within themselves. They have to learn their emotions, and it makes them a much better man. The second thing we want to talk about how marriage makes men better is that marriage helps to focus our purpose as men. Marriage moves us from the focus of me, what do I want? What should I do? Where should I go? We think all about ourselves. It goes from me to we. What's best for us? What should we do? Where should we go? And that's a big shift in our thinking. It's a big shift in how we live because it broadens a man's purpose. And it goes from a self-centered focus, which a lot of men have. In fact, everybody has it, really. But he focuses on an us because his wife is brought into the situation, and ultimately his family is brought in if he has children. So that's good for a man because it challenges a man and it pushes him to grow and to step up in how he lives, how he thinks, what he does, because he has to consider everyone and not just himself. Before he got married, it was all about him. What did he want? What did he do? But now, when you add a wife into the situation, it adds an us. And that's a powerful motivator for men because men understand that on a deep level. They understand the need to protect. They understand the need to sacrifice. And a man who sacrifices for the good of others, who helps others, that's the most powerful man in the world because he's putting aside what he wants and doing something for the good of someone else. That's better for society. It's better for families. It's better for men because it gives men a purpose greater than themselves. And men whose purpose is only themselves, they're the worst kind of men. They're power hungry. They're all these things, and we're not going to get into all that. But a man who has a purpose outside of himself is a man who's better. And when you get married, you begin that process because you have to think of someone other than yourself. Men understand that in a big sense. They really do. But marriage kind of brings that into his life in a reality. Here's a tangible someone who depends on me. And then when you start having children, it's the same way. You think about more than yourself. It's about others. And the family gives men that tangible thing to look at, to live for. It makes men more mature. It makes men better. They make better choices. Even men who've made a bunch of bad choices in life. Maybe they haven't been the best. Sometimes when it comes down to important matters, when it's big, they step up. Why? Because they know someone's depending on them. And a lot of times it's their family that makes them do that. One of my favorite examples of that is the old movie Independence Day. And I know I talk about it all the time, but it was such a powerful movie to me because this one scene, there's a guy who was a pilot. I think he was crop dusting now, and he was kind of a drunk, hadn't been a good dad, had made a lot of bad choices. And there's a whole interplay of how aliens kidnapped him earlier, and that was just kind of funny. But he had really kind of let his family down. Well, there's a key part in the movie where things aren't working, and he figures out, I'm going to have to give my life to save everybody. And so he looks at a picture of his family in the cockpit, and he says, tell my kids I love them. And it's his way of saying, I'm going to do this. And the interesting part of that is for men, we get that part. We get that sacrifice. And he was sacrificing, and he helped to save the world by doing that. But he was doing it for his family. He was saving his family. You see, we can talk about saving the world, but that's kind of big and a broad overview. But when we talk about saving our family, it makes men better. When men have someone else depending on them, when men have someone else that they have to rely on and be responsible for, it just makes them better men. That's why marriage is good for men. Having a family focuses our attention. It focuses our purpose. We realize, hey, these people are counting on me, and the better side of men shows up. We begin to see that our choices don't just affect us, they affect others, the good and the bad. And that'll help us, if we listen, move to new levels of maturity. Now, not every man listens, but hey, that's just reality. But you can. It's an opportunity for you as a man to grow, to get that long-term perspective. Because when men are responsible, they tend to step up. When men know that someone else is depending on me, they tend to be better men. They make better choices. One of my favorite animes is My Hero Academia, and there's a character, Deku. And Deku is just kind of learning all the powers he has and all this other stuff. I don't want to get into the whole story. But usually Deku's greatest breakthroughs with his power come when others are depending on him. When he has to save someone else, he reaches a new level of power. And I think that's a representation of us as men. You can do a lot of great things by yourself. But when you're married and you have a wife and then you have kids and they're relying on you, a lot of times you discover areas and parts of yourself you didn't know you had. When someone's counting on us as men, we feel an obligation, and that really moves us to a higher level of manhood. And that's good for us as men. You see, it focuses our purpose. It's not just broad and whatever. It's focused on these people depend on me. These people need me. And that grows us up as men. And I think it's great for us. A man's purpose is always better when it's focused outside of himself. Marriage takes our purpose and broadens it. It opens it up to a whole new level. We learn about another person, another family, how they did things. And it makes us think about our purpose. It makes us better. It makes us more powerful as men. It affects our life and it affects our future legacy. Okay, the third way that marriage benefits men is that it helps men build a lasting legacy. Now, many men live with the desire to do something significant with their life, to make a difference in the world. Every man, I think, has something in them that wants to do that, to be great. And that's why as men, growing up and even as adults, we have heroes. We have people we kind of look up to because we see them as doing something great with their life. And so we envy them. Like Batman for a lot of men is a hero because he's doing something about the problems in Gotham City. And that's why we want our heroes to be heroes. It's almost like today movies want to humanize all our heroes and say, well, they're not perfect. Well, we know that, but we kind of want our heroes to be better than us. I don't want a hero that's just like me. I want a hero who does the right thing so I can be challenged to do the right thing. And we see that especially in young kids, young boys. They have their heroes. Growing up, they latch on to different heroes. It could be a sports hero. It could be a fictional Marvel hero. When I was a kid, I used to come home after school in the afternoon and the TV stations would play old reruns, from like the 1950s and 60s TV shows, Gilligan's Island, all that. And one of my favorites was The Lone Ranger. It really was. I loved The Lone Ranger because The Lone Ranger was a man who came in and did the right thing. He and Tano would go in and clean up a town and do stuff. And I loved the Lone Ranger. He was one of my favorites because he kind of stood up for justice and truth. And there's something about that, I think, in us as men. We long to build that lasting legacy, to leave that. We want to make a difference. And I think that's something God gave us to help us and motivate us in our life. Now, marriage gives men the greatest opportunity to bring significance into the world. You say, what? Marriage? Yeah, because marriage and children are a built-in legacy for men. They just are. It's a built-in way for you to make a difference in the world. And it really is sad today that a lot of dads are missing out on that because they're missing out on being involved in their kids' lives. They're having children, but they're not staying married. They're not staying in the family. And the single mom epidemic has been devastating to children over the last 50 years. It's really hurt a lot of them. I worked with teenagers for 30 years, and I saw the effects of the single parent home. Now, that's not a knock on single moms because they were just doing the best they could. But kids were designed to be raised in a home with a mother and a father. And the ones that had that, even if it wasn't sometimes the best, was better than those who didn't. And so we've got to understand that as men, we have an opportunity right in front of us when we get married and when we have children to be involved in their lives and to leave a positive legacy in the world. That's just a reality. And when a man makes his marriage and his family the priority in his life, he's really building a powerful legacy. He's doing it in a few different ways. One, healthy marriages. They're an example to others. How many healthy marriages do you see today? How many people do you see that have gotten married and stayed married for long term and seem to enjoy their life? We don't see that many, do we? It's sad. The divorce rate is high. We see people in marriage sometimes not being very happy. And it's just not a good example to others. And that's why I think a lot of people aren't getting married. They think, why should I get married? It doesn't look fun. But when a man focuses on having a healthy marriage, when he focuses on being married, loving his wife, they are an example to everyone around them. They really are. And you leave a legacy. Because the truth is, people are watching you. They're watching you and your wife, how you interact. When they see you building a strong relationship with your wife, when they see you loving your wife, it affects them. It really does. And that's even before we talk about having kids. I'm just talking about the marriage itself. Your marriage will impact all the people you're in relationship with through your whole life. If you are focused on your marriage, if you are a man who makes your marriage a priority, just that alone right there will impact hundreds of people over your lifetime because they'll see it, they'll be impacted by it. They'll think, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And that's a powerful legacy you can leave in someone else's life. That's a powerful way you can impact people. Now, another way that marriage does that, and it's a powerful legacy, is your children. If you begin having children, your kids will outlive you. They just will. Kids are a huge part of our legacy to the world. And more often than not, our kids will outlive us. Okay? There's the rare exception, but more often than not, our kids will outlive us, and they are the greatest legacy we leave to this world. They just are. And men, I think, know this intuitively because men sense that from their dad, whether they were there or not. But our society's brainwashed men into thinking your success is your legacy. Your finances are your legacy. Your business acumen, that's your legacy. And it's not. Your children are your legacy because they're going to represent us better than anything else in this world. And they're the things that will survive us. Your ideas, they'll come and go. Businesses are going to move on. You may start the business. The business may have your name on it, but one day people won't remember you. Like it's funny, when I went to university, you have all these buildings that are named after people. And a lot of times there's a plaque on the building talking about great things that they did. And I'm sure at the time the buildings were built, everybody knew who that person was. But later, none of us did. In fact, we just kind of walked by the plaque and it got to be where we didn't even notice that. And you say, well, that's their legacy. The building's named after them. Okay, they have a building named after them. Nobody remembers. Nobody really thinks about it. Our children do think about us. They will remember us. And they're the ones who will really care. And that's why our children are a great legacy to leave. And that's why as men, we want to focus on them and let that be part of our legacy. Now, the other thing we don't want is we don't want regrets that own us. If you are living for your family, if you're living outside of yourself, regrets won't own you. But a lot of men do. You hear of successful men as they get older, they look back and what do? They regret. And what do they most often regret? Spending time with their family. They weren't there for their family. They say, I wish I'd spent more time. You rarely hear a man who's dying say, I wish I'd spent more time at work. I wish I'd made more money. They just don't do it. Why? Because they realize when they gets toward the end, what was really important. What was important in my life? In fact, Steve Jobs' daughter, she wrote a book called Small Fry. And in the book, she says this. She talks about how Jobs finally apologized to her toward the end of his life. And you say, well, that's just because he was dying and he knew it. Yes. And he figured out what was important. So what did he do? He apologized. And this is what he said, specifically for not spending more time with her, disappearing as she became an adult, not returning her messages, forgetting her birthday. She refers to the apology as a movie ending for her life. And I get that, but she would have rather him been there her life. She would have rather had him, not the money, not the fame, him. And I think men get that in a lot of ways. And we don't have to live with this regret if we choose our marriages and our family now. I don't want men to have that regret. I'm not saying you're going to be perfect. I'm not saying you're going to do everything right. But if you consistently, day after day, choose my marriage, my family, what you're doing is you're choosing to have a positive legacy. And as you grow, they grow. As you change, they change. And that's a powerful legacy to lead in the world. And the great thing is, doing all of this matures us as men. It makes us better. Your greatest legacy will be your family. It just will be. And men have got to recognize that and do something about it. And by doing that, it makes them better men. Okay, guys, closing out the show today, let's understand something. Marriage makes us better as men. It just does. There's no other way to think about it. Now, not every man is going to get married. That's just the reality. Some men have different callings in their life to do different things, but the majority of men should get married. They just should. It won't take our freedom away. It's not a ball and chain and all this other stuff that's out there. You see, men, when they get married, are actually going to live a better life than those who stay single but could get married. I'm not talking about those who are called to be single. That's a different thing. I'm talking about men who could get married but choose not to. Those men tend to be selfish. Those men tend to not live as good a life as those who are married. You can look at all the statistics and see that. And marriage helps men. It just does. And we've talked about that. It encourages our intimacy. We grow closer to our wives, to our children. It gets us on that journey of emotions, learning our own emotions, digging into relationships, becoming more mature. It focuses our purpose. When we're living for our family and sacrificing for them, it just makes us better men in every area of our life. And it also helps us to build a lasting legacy. We're building something that's going to outlive us, something positive that can make a difference in the world. You see, marriage is good for us as men. So I want to challenge you today to quit bad-mouthing marriage, quit bad-mouthing families. Maybe you just got married and you're already saying ball and chain and all this other. Change your attitude toward it. Marriage is wonderful. Marriage is good for us as men. Marriage has always made men better, and it always will.
You've been listening to the Confident Man Podcast. Click subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can connect with David on Facebook and Instagram at David Maxwell. Find resources to help you as a man at theconfidentman.me. That's theconfidentman.me.